Stephen the Devil French is an infamous name etched into the dark side of the historic city of Liverpool for all the wrong reasons. Armed robber, bouncer, taxman, gangster, call him what you will, but he was a significant force, almost a bogeyman on the streets of Liverpool's criminal underbelly through the 70s, 80s and 90s. In this upload, we'll look at a violent clash between Stephen French and his team of up-and-coming hard men, going head-to-head with members of the notorious Liverpool Mafia over a club door which is seen from Stephen French's perspective as a pivotal moment in Liverpool's underworld. In the 70s and 80s, as Stephen French learned his trade, in the underworld most of Liverpool was controlled by a group of powerful white men from criminal families who controlled interest in clubs, pubs and criminal activities as a collective to safeguard their interests. They would socialise together and were untouchable, forming the media dubbed Liverpool Mafia in the late 70s, when shifting from armed robbery and safe blowing to the lucrative trade in drugs. At the same time as the crime lords of Liverpool were expanding their business interests, there was a violent battle going on in the streets of Toxteth in a burning hot summer of '81, with residents of colour sick and tired of their treatment from police and the limited opportunities around them. A full-blown riot kicked off, and at the heart of it was Stephen French and other young black men who were not going to stand idly by and be pushed around by the police. They felt they had every right to be offered the opportunities of every other person in the city, no matter colour. They were all Scousers after all. Over the weekend that followed, disturbance erupted into full-scale rioting, with pitched battles between police and young men, in which petrol bombs and paving stones were thrown. During the violence, milk floats were set on fire and directed at police lines. Rioters were also observed using scaffolding tubes to charge police lines. The Merseyside police had issued its officers with long protective shields, but these proved inadequate in protecting officers from missile attacks, and in particular the effects of petrol bottles. The overwhelming majority of officers were not trained either in using the shields or in public order tactics. The sole offensive tactic available to officers, the baton charge, proved increasingly ineffective in driving back the attacking crowds of rioters. The rioting lasted 9 days, during which Merseyside police said 468 police officers were injured, 500 people were arrested, and at least 70 buildings were damaged so severely by fire they had to be demolished. The significance of the riots and rebellion from angry young men of colour was soon going to spill out on the streets of Liverpool's criminal underworld, bringing two contrasting forces together in a clash between the old school, primarily white working class villains and this new group of bonded young powerful black men and their friends who were determined to get a share of the lucrative rackets that were on their doorstep. Stephen French and his good friend Andrew John were formidable, dangerous men who had been taught the art of street martial arts, where the aim was to end confrontations as quickly and violently as necessary. Both big men, 6 foot plus and physically fit, experienced in combat, learnt during the Toxteth riots, set them in good stead to make a splash in the criminal underworld. Armed robberies and taxing drug deals were the crime of choice, but they soon realised that getting a slice of the lucrative door trade, protecting pubs and clubs, would put them in a good place to earn big money. Control the doors, and you decide who gets to supply the merchandise, which you can take a fat cut from. Stephen French opened his own security company and decided to make his move. It was now in the mid to late 80s, and French was a force to be reckoned with and a champion kickboxer to boot. He knew moving into territory ruled by Liverpool's elite faces, men like Charlie Seeger, Tommy Gildea, etc., was not going to go down well, so surrounded himself with a formidable team. The likes of Andrew John, a member of the British karate team, and a host of tough boxers and street fighters mixed in colour. All that mattered was they could fight and be loyal. The club Stephen decided on was the Grafton, a club under the control of a heavy firm led by Tommy Gildea, who was a feared hard man and alleged big-time drug importer. It was said that Gildea could knock you out with either hand and was a real handful. Gildea was also good friends with the ultra-violent Bromley Sr., a feared taxman in his own right, who would later end up being murdered in his friend Charlie Seeger's house. Stephen French talks of Gildea coming to the door of the Grafton with a firm of lads, and a straightener taking place between the formidable Andrew John and the power-hitting Gildea to settle the matter of who run the door. A ferocious fight took place, with French claiming John getting the upper hand in a melee of punches, kicks and grappling, before one of French's own men stepped in to break it up, as Stephen French knocked out some of Gildea's other lads there. The reason French gives to why his own man broke the fight up was due to his worry that Gildea would be back with reinforcements to wipe them out. He wasn't far wrong. There was no way a man of Tommy Gildea's ilk was going to take this lying down. French states he did come back with over 300 men to decimate Stephen French and his security firm once and for all. They would have no doubt achieved this, but French, expecting the attack, opened the doors and let off shots from a handgun, which dispersed the attackers and brought the police flooding in to quell the violence. In his book, The Devil, link in the description, Stephen French goes into more detail, but said in essence a deal was struck between Gildea and himself over the door contract, which was a significant moment for French and his team winning a foothold in the lucrative protection trade, and they became friends. Of course, we have to accept in autobiographies the story is told from one side and cannot be taken as fact, but it has to be accepted that Stephen French was a feared man at one point during his career and is a part of Liverpool's criminal history. I do understand the hatred felt for Stephen French from some quarters, as taxing other professional criminals is something that is not looked at honourably, especially when once you have made it financially, you down tools, turn your back on crime and criticise people within that world. But we all have our own journeys to walk, and I felt this was an interesting moment in time when a man of colour broke into the upper echelons of organised crime in Liverpool.